Before we get into today's game, I want to talk about the sponsors for my channel. Card Conduit is the best way to sell your unused Magic cards. Whether you've got a box of unsorted bulk, or a complete and alphabetized set, there's a great option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% better than using any one buy list, and that's after fees are applied, you can rest assured you'll get the best bang for your buck. If you're a skeptic like me, their easy customer service and detailed reports make the whole interaction transparent and safe. And if you use the affiliate link in the description below, or the promo code MTGMUDSTA, you'll save 10% off their fees. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. Not to mention an easy-to-use and great online buy list. And if you use the promo code MTGMUDSTA, your first purchase of MTG Sealed and Singles will be 5% off. And Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest deck. So be sure to use the code MUDSTA or the affiliate link down below to save 5% on your next order. Today's patron shoutout goes to Delmer Lacroix. Thank you, Delmer, for supporting me through Patreon. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game has Kuzno, Eric, and new to the channel Desmond joining us. Desmond has decided to play everyone's favorite wolf, Voja, keeping Fauna Shaman, Immerwolf, Scattered Grove, Arwen Mortal Queen, Findhorn Elves, Soul Ring, and Grand Warlord Rada. Kuzno is playing his Kuz Clues deck, playing Lonis, keeping Forest, Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, Birds of Paradise, Cultivate, Karn Sign of Urza, Martha Jones, and a Piper Wright public reporter. Eric is playing his Omo deck, but unlike mine, it's not focused on gates, and it's more focused on lords. He's keeping Forest, Urza's Power Plant, Soul Ring, Rampant Frogtua, Sage of the Maze, Magus of the Candelabra, and Eureka Moment. Last but not least, I have borrowed Eric's Flip Tamiyo deck, keeping 3 Steps Ahead, Birds of Paradise, Command Tower, Forest, Prophet's Edict, Memory, Island, and a Chasm Skulker. Kuzno wins the die roll and starts us off. He plays a Yavimaya, tapping it for a green to cast Birds of Paradise. Eric just plays a Flooded Grove and casts Soul Ring. I've got a Command Tower and tap it for 1 blue for Tamiyo. Desmond draws, plays a Scattered Groves, and passes. Kuzno draws and plays a Rimewood Falls, and is then able to play a green and a blue for Lonis, and passes after that. Eric's got an Urza's Power Plant, and he's then able to cast Magus of the Candelabra. He then follows up by playing a Rampant Froggantua, and passes to me. I've got an island, and cast Prop's Eidetic Memory, drawing a card, and then going to combat. Going to combat, I swing Tamiyo at Eric, making a clue token and dealing 1. Desmond's got a Command Tower for turn and casts his own Soul Ring. He follows up with a Fauna Shaman and passes to Kuzno. Kuzno's got a Forest for turn and joins the Soul Ring Club, casting his own. Kuzno then casts Piper Wright, public reporter, and makes a clue as she comes in. He then follows up with Martha Jones and makes another clue token and passes. Eric draws and goes to combat. He swings the Froggantua at me, dealing 3 and milling 3, and hits a Forest which he puts into play tapped. In his second main phase, he then casts Omo and puts an everything counter onto his power plant. He then taps the power plant for 2, and puts the 2 into the X of the Magus of the Candelabra to untap 2 lands. He's then able to use those lands to cast Sage of the Maze, and he passes to me. I draw and play a Forest. I then cast 3 visits, going to find a breeding pool. Taking 2 so it'll come in untapped, and then pay 2 to sacrifice a clue and draw a card. Moving to combat, I put a +1/+1 counter onto Tamiyo, and swing her at Eric, making a clue token and then dealing 2. I then pass after that. Desmond draws and continues his Elf Ball, playing Findhorn Elves and then Farhaven Elves. He goes and finds a mountain off the elf as it comes in, and he passes turn. Kuzno draws and sacrifices all 3 clues to Lonis' ability, which puts 3 counters onto Piper and makes Piper and Martha unblockable as well. He then looks at the top 3 cards of Eric's deck, and he gets Master of the Pearl Trident, and he puts it onto play. Going to combat, he then swings Piper at Eric for 4, who takes the hit for 4, and Kuzno gets to investigate 4 times. In his post-combat main phase, Kuzno then casts Karn, Sign of Urza. Once he's out, he down-ticks the Walker, making a construct token that's as big as the amount of artifacts he has, and he passes it to Eric after that. Eric draws and plays an Urza's Mine, and then casts Eureka Moment using the Sage of Maze. He draws his card and puts a forest into play, and then activates the Magus of the Candelabra to untap his lands. Moving to combat, he swings the Fargantua at me again, and Omo goes at Desmond. I take 3, while Desmond blocks with the Fauna Shaman, and Eric gets to put an everything counter onto a creature and a land of his. He then reveals Horizon of Progress, Forest, and an island off the Fargantua trigger, and puts them into play. In his second main phase, he casts a Desert Warfare, and passes after that. I've got an island for turn, and cast Chasm Skulker. I then crack a clue, and I put a +1/+1 counter onto the Skulker, and I go to combat, putting another +1/+1 counter onto Tamiyo. I swing her at Eric, making a clue, and he takes 3. I pass after that. Desmond draws and casts Rhythm of the Wild. He then plays Rampant Growth, and saves time by activating the Fauna Shaman to go and find Roaming Throne after discarding a creature. Desmond then passes, with Kuzno sacrificing a clue during Desmond's end step to draw a card. Kuzno draws and plays a Restless Vinestalk, and he then upticks Karn. I give him the Sakura Tribe Elder, which he puts to hand, and he then casts it. Kuzno then continues sacrificing clues to Lonis' ability, but Eric responds with Summary Dismissal, attempting to counter all the triggers. Kuzno responds using Familiar's Ruse, however, and bounces Sakura Tribe Elder to counter it, which then lets him make Piper unblockable and a bunch of other creatures unblockable as well. Kuzno's Lonis trigger then resolves, having targeted Desmond, and he gets to keep an Incubation Druid off of it. Kuzno then moves to combat, swinging Piper and Martha at Desmond. With Piper connecting, Kuzno gets a pile of clue tokens, and he then passes to Eric. Eric draws and plays an Arch of Erazka. He then casts Gaia's Blessing, shuffling 3 cards from his graveyard into his library, and then draws a card. He then casts one of the cards that he left in his graveyard, which is March from Velisvel. Eric chooses Urza's Mind as his land type, and turns his 3 lands into Rampant Fraugantuas. Going to combat, he swings Omo at me and the 4 Fraugantuas at Desmond. Eric gets his on-attack trigger, making the Horizon of Progress and Everything land, and I block Omo while Desmond just takes the hit from all of the frogs. Eric gets 4 triggers from his Fraugantuas, and ends up keeping 6 lands off of going 12 cards deep. With nothing else, he passes to me. I draw and play a forest. I cast Birds of Paradise, and then crack a clue token, drawing a card and moving to combat. I put a +1/+1 counter onto Tamiyo, and swing her at Karn, making a clue token. Karn then gets taken out, and after that, I pass. Desmond draws and casts Voja, giving it haste with the Riot trigger. He then activates Fauna Shaman, discarding a card, and goes to find Selvala, Heart of the Wild, and then goes to combat. Desmond swings Voja at Eric, and puts 3 +1/+1 counters onto his team from Voja's trigger, and then draws a card. Eric then takes 8 commander damage, and Desmond passes. Kuzno draws and plays a Tireless Tracker, and then plays a Tangled Islet, making another clue token. He casts a Fleeting Memories, but Eric responds, tapping and untapping his Sage of the Mazes and Magus of Candelabra to get him enough mana to activate Arch of Erazka to draw a card. Sadly, it's not a response, but I do have something, with a Beast Within, and I target Piper. Kuzno responds to this by activating Lonis, sacrificing all of his clues to target Eric. This adds 9 +1/+1 counters onto the Tireless Tracker, and the Lonis trigger then resolves, with Kuzno keeping Lord of Atlantis from it. He also gets to make Piper and the Tireless Tracker unblockable before Martha gets taken out. Finally, Fleeting Memories then resolves. After that, Kuzno goes to combat and he swings at Eric, with Eric taking 18 and dropping to 6. In his second main phase, Kuzno then casts a Kur Tribe Elder and passes. Eric draws and plays a Forest. He activates Arch of Araska again, drawing a card, and then plays a Timber Protector. He continues by casting an Avenger of Zendikar, and he then goes to combat. He swings the Frog at me, and Omo goes at Kuzno. And Kuzno blocks the Beast token while I take 3. After combat, Eric uses the Magus of the Candelabra to untap his lands, which gives him enough and access to the Arch again to draw a card, and he passes to me after that. I draw and cast Tamiyo the Moon Sage, down taking her when she's out and targeting Kuzno to draw 5 cards. This flips my Tamiyo Inquisitive Student into Tamiyo Seasoned Scholar. I then play a Forest and I cast a Fairy Mastermind. Going to combat, I put 5 +1/+1 counters onto the Fairy Mastermind and then pass through combat. Uptick my Tamiyo to make sure that anything that attacks me or a Planeswalker I control gets -1, -0 until my next turn. Desmond draws and plays Selvala, giving her haste. He then activates and taps her for 8 mana. He uses 4 of it to cast Grand Warlord Rada, giving her a +1/+1 counter. He then activates Fauna Shaman, discarding a card, and going to find a Hellkite Charger. Desmond then continues by casting an Unnatural Growth, and then Arwen, Mortal Queen, and he goes to combat. Moving to combat, Unnatural Growth pumps Desmond's creatures by double their power and toughness, and he then swings at Kuzno with Voja. This gives Desmond's team 6 +1/+1 counters, and he draws a card. Facing down 22 lethal commander damage, Kuzno decides to chump with his Beast token to not completely get taken out. However, Eric is ready with a Reality Shift and removes the Beast. With that on the stack, Desmond activates Arwen, removing the counter from her to give Voja a lifelink counter. Kuzno then dies to commander damage, and Desmond gains 23 life. After that, Desmond passes. During his end step, Eric activates Horizon of Progress and puts a Forest into play, which gives a +1/+1 counter to all of his plant tokens because of the Avenger of Zendikar. Eric draws and plays an Elvish Champion, and then activates Arch of Araska to draw a card. He then continues by casting Nissa Vital Force, and down ticks it to return Collective Restraint to his hand and casts it. Eric then uses Magus of the Candelabra to make a ton of mana, and he activates the Arch again. He then casts Shishiro the Anointed, and he then sacrifices the Horizon of Progress, drawing a card. Eric then rips a Peer Pressure off the top, and he casts it, picking Wolves, and uses it to gain control of Voja. Eric then untaps his Sage of the Maze, and he goes to combat, and swings out at Desmond. This lets Eric gain an everything counter onto Glimmer Post and Voja thanks to Omo, and Desmond can't block, dropping to 7. Eric gets to draw a card off Shishiro, and then gets to mill 17 because his Froggantua is massive because Kuzno's gotten taken out and it's been pumped up, but only finds 3 lands off of it. Those 3 lands, however, pump all of his plant creatures. And Eric then moves to his second main phase, playing a land and pumping again. He then moves to cast Drown in Dreams, drawing 3 and milling me for 3, and then passes to me. I draw and play an island, down-ticking Tamiyo and targeting Eric. He uses the Sage of the Maze's ability to untap itself, so I only draw 4. And I then cast a Brain Surge. Once that's done, I channel Beseiju and I blow up Collective Restraint. Eric goes to find a land, and I then move to combat. I get my Eidetic Memory trigger and put them onto the Birds of Paradise, and swing it at Desmond and the Fairy Mastermind at Eric, killing them both through combat and winning the game. Game review time. This game was 1 hour, 3 minutes, and some miscellaneous amount of seconds, which probably don't really matter. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoy seeing when people build decks that are similar to my own, in this case Omo, but taken in a different direction. Eric decided to focus more on running all the lords in blue and green, or at least the really powerful ones like Lord of the Unreal, etc., and basically pumping up his board that way. It was pretty effective. That Froggantua, which I've had a hard time saying, surprised the heck out of me. I saw that card initially and I was like, oh, I don't really want to play this. This is going to mill me cards and never hit me lands. In his case, it did the opposite. It seemed to ramp him really hard, and I think it was a really cool card. I was actually really thankful that he lent me the Tamiyo deck because I was looking for something new, and sitting down, I didn't expect to do very much except for make clue tokens. It was kind of funny to see, as soon as that eidetic memory came out, how much drawing impacted my game plan since it made all of my creatures potentially massive. So that was really fun. I liked that deck a lot. I think I was able to scooch a win out because no one really thought I was that threatening for most of the game, so that kind of worked in my favor. Voja, yeah, Voja is aggressive. I can see why people were really stressed about it. As soon as the engine gets going, things get out of hand fast. You're drawing cards and pumping your board up at the same time, which is just wild. And it has like every single valid keyword that you could possibly want except for haste, which with Rhythm of the Wilds, you fix that. So, but thanks to Desmond for coming out and for bringing this new deck and showing it to us. We've filmed a couple games with him, and I'm hoping to have him back again soon. Clue decks. I have a love or hate relationship with clue decks. I got whooped really badly by Andy Fleury playing, I think Lonis actually, with Rise and Shine, and he just flooded the board with food and clue tokens and then just absolutely smashed face. Kuzno deck didn't have the Rise and Shine, but it seemed like between the Piper and Martha, he was getting so many +1/+1 counters and so many ways to make his stuff go through or unblockable. It was going to hurt. It was going to hurt probably more than the 4/4s in the sense that they were going to be like 19/19s. The constructs that were being made were also becoming massive, and it was just a really well-functioning deck. His engine was really smooth. He was getting to steal stuff. He was getting draw. He was getting ramp. As soon as he had that last enchantment, he was going to be potentially milling people. That was a lot of stuff going on. I think it took the entire table, which we really kind of did gang up on him, to take him out. Otherwise, we were all dead. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.